Barry, thanks for sitting down with me today. I appreciate it a lot.
Glad to.
Barry, as incoming president, you're going to be representing plant breeders at all levels of government and institutional. Can you tell us a little bit about what your plans are? What's the number one goals you have set for yourself?
Sure. It'll be an exciting year, I think, for NAPB. We embarked on a strategic planning process earlier this year, and one big goal is to finish that up. And finishing that will allow us to set some priorities on action items. Some of those, I think, are going to be to more closely work with the industry partners that have really come forward to support the organization, to continue supporting graduate students in our group. We had over 90 register this year. It's the biggest group we've had. They see value in it, and we want to continue that relationship. And so then having our committees work closer together to achieve those goals is important.
Busy times ahead.
Yes.
Busy times ahead. Barry, dollars and cents make the world go round. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about how the funding works with the public breeding programs in the U.S. now, and how does NAPB fit into that?
Sure, yeah. The public plant breeding sector, funding-wise, has been cut over the years, sometimes by direct cuts, but more often just by not increasing levels of funding and having inflation eat away at the real purchasing value of the dollars that we do get. And over time, the shift in the granting agencies towards more of the basic sciences has also reduced that amount of funding for just applied plant breeding. So what we at NAPB want to do, have as one of our goals, is to engage more with the federal, at the federal level and with our private partners in conjunction, so that we have a unified voice in expressing the need for a stable level of funding for plant breeding, public plant breeding, and a base level of funding so that it's more stable over time.
Right. You mentioned earlier graduate students and how they had attended your event this year in droves, which is great. NAPB, I think, has taken on a role of supporting young plant breeders and graduate students. Can you talk to us a little bit about, they've got a big task ahead of them. 2050 coming up, 9 billion people to feed. How is NAPB going to help support these up-and-coming plant breeders?
That's a very good question. It is a daunting task when you think about adding 2 billion more people to the planet to feed, and many in developing countries where food supply is more scarce and risky from year to year. So they have a very tough task ahead, and what we want to do is just support them in their educational endeavors. One of the things that we do that I think is really important for students is provide field tours at our meetings every year. In addition to the scientific content that they hear from our invited speakers, being able to see what companies are doing, the investments that they're making in sort of industrial scale breeding that will bring traits and value to the market that we just can't bring as individual breeders, and seeing the breadth and diversity of skills that plant breeders have in working in different crops is important as well. So I think just a breadth of education will help them to achieve these goals, as well as understanding that breeding is a team activity. It's not one person, it's integrating multiple disciplines to attack the problem, because just alone, no single discipline will be able to solve the problem.
And if meeting some of the young people that were here the last couple of days are any sign, the future looks pretty bright.
It really does. Our graduate student working group in the NAPB is very strong. They're working at every level of the organization, from the strategic planning all the way to planning the meetings. So it's very encouraging to see the level of dedication and commitment and how bright these students are.
One of your major research interests is in peanut breeding and genetics. I was surprised, and I think many would be surprised to know that the U.S. is number 3
yes.
in the world
yes.
in peanut production.
Yes,
which is, like I say, a surprising note to make, and probably exactly part of the reason why you're so heavily invested in it. Can you tell us a little bit about what the future looks like for peanut breeding, and maybe even how does that tie into plant breeding more in general?
Sure. Yeah, peanut breeding is relatively young, I'd say, in terms of both investment. All of it's done in the public sector, so there is very little to no private investment in peanut breeding. However, our breeding programs in universities and the USDA around the country in the U.S. have made astounding progress in the past several years. In the past 2 years, we've set national yield records on a farm level of over 2 tons per acre, which is was unthought of just several years ago. And that's a combination of just grinded out regular plant breeding, bringing in new germplasm that brings in new genes that are improving our disease resistance, that protects yield, also just improving yield potential. And one of the exciting things we have on the horizon now, we're moving into the genomics era with peanut. We've sequenced 2 of the progenitor species of peanut, the diploids, and have sequenced the tetraploid as well. As a community, this is an effort by the manufacturers of peanut products like Mars and Hershey and others like them. The shellers of peanuts as well as the farmers have all put in $2 million each for a $6 million effort to sequence the peanut genome and bring the tools of the genomics era and marker-assisted selection into the peanut breeding arena.
So is that a platform, or is that a system that's scalable for other crops as well? Does it make sense for other crops?
I would say peanut is probably playing catch up to the major crops in that area. Certainly there would be things that could be learned in the peanut world that could be applicable to other crops, and that has happened in other crops where we're benefiting from the technology developed there as well. But certainly it will benefit peanut probably most directly.
Barry, when I talk to people about plant breeding, often what I get back is a genetically modified, plant breeders genetically modify things. We're not interested in that. What's your take on this? How do we portray to the rest of the world and consumers at large that plant breeding's been around for decades and centuries?
Yes.
How do we portray this to them properly?
Yeah, it's a difficult task because so much of our population has moved away from the farms. We don't have first-hand experience in raising animals and raising food for ourselves or for the animals. So it's a difficult thing to do, but we're going to have to engage at a different level with our consumer today to help them understand that plant breeding is really a foundation of agriculture, and that it's not only genetic modification, but that also genetic modification plays a major role in plant improvement, because if the traits that we need to protect our crops are not in the native germplasm, that offers a very powerful tool to protect the crop and make it actually safer for us than it would be if it were infested with diseases or insects. So there's a big educational role that we need to continue to work on. And we probably haven't done the best job of that in the past, and I think that's becoming more and more recognized. So I think we'll see better education, better information for our consumers in the future.
I think the other piece that comes into play is as we try and quote-unquote distance ourselves or create a separation between traditional plant breeding and genetically modifying, we run the risk of creating a sense that there's a problem with genetically engineering. And it's very difficult to feather that walk.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we've been breeding plants for thousands of years. Even if it wasn't by modern methods, farmers were selecting the best plant from their field to propagate for the following year, and natural cross-pollinations occurred, natural mutations occurred that created opportunity. And those things are things we do every day in plant breeding. And we need to continue to do that. We will continue to do that work. And that's just natural. There's nothing genetically modified about that. The idea, though, that genetic modification is somehow dangerous is largely a myth. The National Academies of Science have looked through all this information and data collection and research studies that have been published, and there's no evidence that it hurts people who consume these products. So, and when you think about the potential for bringing food to another 2 billion people on this planet, it's a necessary technology that we won't be able to do without.
Barry, thanks for sitting down with me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Shawn.